because it changes the definition of what is possible and what all of us have to do. And it means, among other things, that in the 21st century, the definition of citizenship will no longer be what it was when I was their age. Well, when I was their age, I was in love with politics, and I hoped I could have some career in it, although no reasonable person would have predicted what happened to me. And to be a good citizen was to stay in school, do the best you could, go as far as you could, work hard, support yourself if you were able to do so, start a family if you could, and be responsible in raising your own kids, pay your taxes, obey the law, follow the news, and be a very informed voter. And if you gave money to your religious institution or to the community chest or the United Way, good for you. Today, it is not possible for a person with any significant gift, and we all have one at least, to be a good citizen without also doing some form of service, giving some time, some money, some skill, some thing outside of just voting and participating in politics. Because we now know in an interdependent world there will always be limits to what any government will be able to do and to the fruits that our vibrant free enterprise system can produce. There will always be gaps, even in the best of times. And in more difficult times, those gaps will widen. I'll just give you an example, just one example. The other night I was down in this part of the city to go to the annual fundraising event for the New York Food Bank. And we may have as many as 2 million people who are food short this year in New York. Now, ever since my heart surgery, I've been working on what you might think of as the reverse problem. I've been working with the American Heart Association to try to stem the rising tide of childhood obesity in America. It's the #1 public health problem in this country. It threatens to bring type 2 diabetes, what we used to call adult onset diabetes. And now the American Medical Association says we can no longer say that. We had a 9-year-old boy in Harlem 2 years ago, who lives near where my office is, diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. It's not adult onset anymore. And it's a direct consequence of what we eat, how we eat, and whether we do or don't exercise, and the way our lives are organized. So the point I want to make is this. Ironically, this current economic crisis, in all probability, will lead to a rise in the number of people who need food and don't have it, and a rise in the rate of obesity. And we had just about stemmed this tide. We had a huge national cultural movement going that we had in thousands of schools, and it involved 1 million kids changing their lives, literally 1 million, and trying to influence their fellows, and with cutting back on the caloric content of soft drinks and candy and vending machines in schools, and changing the exercise programs, the whole 9 yards. Why is that? Because, you see, I don't know if you saw it in the paper today, but today there was a story which made Jack Lew glad he was the Deputy Secretary of State and not the Director of OMB. In April, tax receipts were down 34% from the year before. So, because of the declining economic activity. People are giving, but they may not have as much to give. Every foundation, including mine, has been blindsided by the current economic difficulties. So what happens? The food bank needs more money. They got more people to feed, and they have to get more contributors because the big contributors can't give as much as they did the year before. At the same time, more and more people are just on the other side of that knife edge. That is, their children are not hungry, but they don't have enough money to pay their other bills. So they spend the money they do have on food that's high in bulk and caloric content but low in nutrition because it's the most inexpensive way to feed however many mouths they have to feed at home. While schools under great pressure are now going to be feeling the temptation to give up their fresh fruits and vegetables and go back to contracting out the school lunch program to people who bring junk pizza or whatever. And all the plans to lay a new track for exercise for the students and the staff may have to be shelved. So ironically, the childhood obesity problem, which arose primarily as a problem of the lower middle class and working poor, who were on the bottom end of a rising economy, and the hunger problem, which is a problem of poverty uncovered by public assistance, are now two sides of the same coin. And why am I telling you this? Because you're here tonight. You get this or you wouldn't be here. And no matter what's happened to you, everybody sitting at one of these tables is better off than 99.9% of the human beings that ever took a breath on planet Earth in all of human history. And we cannot forget that. And we cannot forget that this interdependent world, which gives these young people the power to change other people's lives and ennoble and empower them to a greater extent than ever before, imposes on those of us who have lived our lives an enormous responsibility to do our part as well. And the fact that we're going through an economic difficulty makes it even more important. And, so I think, for example, I was ecstatic when the President asked and the Congress complied with passing this bipartisan service bill, which finally, in 2009, 17 years after I first proposed it, will take over the next decade, 8 years, the number of people serving in AmeriCorps at 250,000 a year. 250,000 a year. And already, and for people who, it's very important to realize how hungry our young people are to be called to this kind of service. We had 200,000 people serve in AmeriCorps in the 5 years we got it up and running when I was president under the leadership of Eli Siegel, and that was more than had served in the 40 years the Peace Corps had been in existence. Now you have huge numbers of people applying for the Peace Corps, huge numbers of, which has been expanded, thank goodness, huge numbers of people applying to AmeriCorps programs, huge numbers of people applying for Teach for America, more than can be accommodated. But by 2017, 25 years after we first proposed it, there will be 250,000 Americans every year, young Americans just like them. And they will be able to move the world. Already they've earned $1 billion in college scholarships just by serving in ways that helped. And so that brings me to my next and last